Our last decade of American life has been defined by virality, from everyone to the two-time president of the United States to the transgender makeup influencer that interviewed the one-time president of the United States. Status has morphed into more ways over the past 10 years than it has in the past 1,000. We're a culture and a nation that demands a certain level of wow from the people that we listen to. If we don't get that, we largely tune out, and tune out very quickly. And this has its drawbacks as well as its perks, obviously. One of the drawbacks of virality, is that oftentimes it's not real. It's fake, manufactured, completely and totally meaningless. With the rise of low-cost creator tools like CapCut and Captions, anyone can make a reel as good as Stephen Bartlett or Alex Hormozy given enough time and training. Whether they give the value that those two give is another thing entirely. Yet one of the perks of virality is that it allows people to rise that otherwise never would have. One of the great things that social media has allowed us to do is give a voice to the people who are formerly never allowed to have one. The creation of a new avenue for voices of purpose to rise from nothing has given us a massive ecosystem of choice from whom we consume our information. It has utterly destroyed the validity of our corrupt gatekeeper class, which is why they're also threatened by its emergence. However, we must be careful with completely throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Should our gatekeeper class be ripped out and replaced with something better? Absolutely. They weren't doing their job, so they need to be removed. This has been an overwhelmingly good thing for the most part. Corrupt information really isn't information at all. It's simply a tool of the elite, of the powerful, to control the masses, to prevent them from seeing their corruption, their malfeasance, their unimpressiveness. But yet, if you do not have something viable to replace those gatekeepers with, you'll only end up with a power vacuum. And power vacuums, more often than not, take time to fill with people who are righteous about wielding it. This is why regime change wars don't work, for example. You'll hardly ever get someone with a good head on their shoulders after the toppling of a past leader. Instead, you will most likely get someone desperate and radical. In 2003 Iraq, for example, ISIS replaced Saddam Hussein. In post-World War I Germany, Hitler replaced the Weimar dynasty. The same dynamic is currently happening in places like Syria and Ukraine, for example. All replacements were not just worse, but far worse than their predecessors, which were bad enough as they were already. This is the classic argument of Chesterton's fence. You stumble upon a random fence in the middle of the field. When you come upon this fence, you can ask one of two questions. Why is this fence here? Or how quickly can we carry it down? The former, the traditionalist answer, is always the better one to ask. The fence, at one point, had a purpose. You wouldn't build one if it didn't. This is common sense. And yet so many people, like they do in so many areas, fail to follow it. And the same is true with all of our institutions. Should we burn some of them completely to the ground? 100%. The FBI, Fox News, and Beyond Meat would be on my chopping block immediately, for starters. As soon as this opportunity began, people began to pounce on it. Depending on who was in power at the time in various sectors of culture, people began to upend institution after institution, inciting a revolution of some of the most foundational things we held dear. What is a woman? What makes someone a good candidate for the most powerful job in the world? What is the best way to live life? Some of these are very important topics. They should be debated and discussed in great detail. Viral actors such as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Matt Walsh, and the School of Hard Knocks broke through in highly gated sectors such as politics, filmmaking, and business. This makes sense. These institutions are in the spotlight, and they should probably get eyeballs from that. Yet what was more interesting to watch is the institutions becoming upended that no one saw coming, and yet proved to be more important in terms of cultural cohesion than the ones everyone saw coming. The institution that no one saw coming, one that turned out to be ripe for revolution, was masculinity. Masculinity in American men had been under consistent assault and destruction for over half a century. No one in America, no man, even in the age of the internet, had gone viral in trying to help men, although many had tried, except for one. The one that finally broke through, the one that changed everything about the attention to, focus towards, and vision into masculinity, was a name that would soon become the most Googled search on the face of planet Earth: Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate, a former world champion kickboxer who had pivoted to become an online influencer, became the first man to both truly grasp the frustrations and problems of young men and communicate to them in ways they best understood. This was the failure of Jordan Peterson in many ways. Jordan Peterson, to be very clear, is my hero and has been for a long time. But the issue with Jordan Peterson, one which he still hasn't addressed, is at the end of the day, he's still an old man in a three-piece suit lecturing like a college professor that he's been for 30 plus years. I happen to love it and find it endearing. Dr. Peterson has rightly earned the title of becoming the world's dad for this specific reason, among others. But Andrew Tate didn't have that problem. As I put in my second book, Toxic Immaturity, instead of taking the role of the disciplinarian and straight-laced dad, as Peterson did, Tate took a different role, that of the cool, successful older brother. He was handsome. He had tattoos and muscle that ripped through every part of his body. He made millions of dollars a month and used it to fund a lifestyle of supercars, mansions, and Ukrainian supermodels. He had the social capital and clout to take aim at the institutions that hated young men: the college system, feminism, woke corporate boardrooms, overbearing mothers. It should be noted that, from the jump, I don't believe that Andrew Tate is a good, sustainable role model for young men at all. He's crude, narcissistic, psychopathic, and unsustainable. He will eventually burn out, just like all the others who have tried, like Dan Bilzerian, Nick Fuentes, and others like them. It is good that he has not sustained the apex of his virality when he was dominating the cultural conversation and was kicked off of every major social media platform on the planet. But what I don't want to spend our time making another "what do you think about Andrew Tate" video. It's a waste of time. If you're looking for one, there are plenty of them out there. Instead, I want to focus on what Andrew Tate did. Even with all of his problems, it wouldn't be fair to say that Andrew Tate hasn't done somewhat of a service to young men. Like Jordan Peterson, who is a sustainable role model across time, he inspired millions of men through his content to improve themselves, to become better, to dedicate themselves to becoming someone worthy of being admired, followed, and respected. It is here that we come to another contrast between the two great masculine influencers of our age. To their credit, both Peterson and Tate talked about what happens to men when they don't improve themselves. And what happens to men when they don't improve themselves? Well, they descend into hell, obviously. They become addicted to drugs, Netflix, and pornography. They don't get a job and earn money. If continued over a number of years, they turn to fentanyl or a 9mm to end their lives. They think the hell they could face on the other side of life could be better than the hell of nihilism that they're faced with in this life. And they could very well be right. The difference, however, was in how they talked about that hell. Peterson, as was typical for him, talked in very ethereal terms. He talked about being a loser in real life in terms of what that could mean for the broader world, for your inability to take action, for your cosmic existence in and of itself. In a way, it wasn't real, which is exactly what Peterson's point was. His goal was to get people, particularly young men, to see the role they had to play in society, and it worked. But Andrew Tate talked about it differently, and more effectively, I would argue. He went right for the jugular, like he did with everything. It's not okay to be a broke, fat, ugly loser, are things he would say. If you don't get yourself right, a woman will never like you. You'll never leave your parents' basement. No one will ever respect you because you're a brokey and a joke. In other words, become like me, a top G, or else. And it worked. Millions of young men took to Andrew Tate's message and still do. Some, unfortunately, have taken it too far, which has led to misery for them. That's the part where Andrew Tate has yet to take an ounce of responsibility. The reality of people who look up to Andrew Tate is that they're most likely not going to end up like Andrew Tate, in the top 1% of everything that defines status for a man. This is where Peterson's long-term vision wins out. There is hardly anyone that could become Andrew Tate, but mostly anyone can become Jordan Peterson. Peterson is a gangly, normative, and otherwise casual man with a voice that sounds like Kermit the Frog. But he's also what Andrew Tate isn't. A man with a happy, monogamous marriage, children who will forever love him, that he's present for, at the head of a movement that will live long beyond him. For all that Andrew Tate has created, it will more likely all die with him. However, Andrew Tate has an interesting perspective on this, and something that I still believe is the truest thing to this date that Andrew Tate has ever said. A common retort to the Tate argument on masculine excellence is the following, quote unquote, "I just want to be average. I don't want to have a supercar," people say. "I want one wife, not 5 women. I want a small, comfortable, nice life with a house, a bit of a yard, and a couple kids with a steady job. I don't want to be a top G. I don't want to be excellent. In other words, I just want to be average, like everyone else, to have what my father had before me." In response, Tate said the following earth-shattering truth. That reality doesn't exist anymore. To prove it, Tate offered up a contrast, the, quote, average life of a man in the 1950s versus that of the, quote, average man today. In the 1950s, for example, the average man's lifestyle was the following. He could provide for a wife and a family on a single income. Interest rates on homes and homes themselves were remarkably affordable. There were plenty of jobs that needed masculine traits, most of which provided a pension for retirement. There were millions of women who wanted a masculine man to marry and who would have been happy to take care of a home and raise children. A college education wasn't needed. In fact, for men, it was largely an inhibitor to success. You could and were encouraged to be involved in many community activities outside of work. Christianity was championed. There weren't any dyes in our food. Pornography was non-existent. Obesity was almost unfathomable. Today's average man, to put it mildly, does not live in this world. The reality of the average man today is far more bleak. Most men today are obese, addicted to pornography, and still living off their parents, especially if they're young. They are so tied down in debt with non-bankruptable student loans and $30,000 in average credit card debt that they can't fathom taking on a mortgage, if they could even get approved for one. Feminism has polluted the minds of women, which demoralizes men on the dating market at every turn. AI and trade deals, along with the promotion of elite college educations, most of which are financially out of reach for most men, have outsourced masculine elements of labor and imported feminine ones. Wages have stagnated. Most churches and social institutions cater to women, not men. They are completely cut off from everything that matters. This is not as an exaggeration, by the way. It is reality, one that Jordan Peterson and Andrew Tate both saw. Peterson made a valiant and correct effort to steer young men in the direction of his solution. Aim up, take on responsibility, create meaning for your life. But it was Andrew Tate's message that resonated most deeply, that was communicated the most effectively to young men. And when boiled down, it actually wasn't much different than Peterson's. They are, oddly enough, mostly two sides of the same coin. However, Tate, much like he does with everything, put it in as stark contrast as he could. Being average in today's world is no longer acceptable. In fact, average isn't just unacceptable, it's a death sentence, quite literally. To be addicted to alcohol, debt, drugs, food, porn, and your parents' basement is to both Peterson and Tate's points, sentence yourself to living in hell. Yet sadly, this is where the majority of our young men reside. The statistics do not lie about this. Our young men, particularly over the past decade, have been enslaved to all of society's worst vices. We have done nothing to reach out, to help them. Moreover, we don't just not help them, we affirm them in their mediocrity. Johnny will figure out eventually, they say. Oh, he's just going through some things, we assure others and ourselves. Your 20s are for figuring your life out, they assert. Wrong, wrong, wrong. This isn't just bad advice, it's harmful advice. Parents who say these things should know this fact. By telling their children, especially their young men, that they cannot launch into the world, that they can delay maturity, that they don't have to become excellent, is to put nails in their own coffins. Both mothers and fathers are at fault here, by the way. Mothers, due to their nurturing nature, when taken to excess, coddle their sons until they devour them alive, just like Hansel and Gretel. They excuse everything about their inadequacies. They chalk it up to being someone or something else's fault and not their own. They tell them lies about how they're so much better than they are when they're actually not. Then when their world comes crashing down on them, as it inevitably will, of course, they protect them, pulling their young men into their clutches so they can take care of them, mother them permanently. As for fathers, their biggest contribution to the failure to launch their sons is a failure of masculine leadership. Fathers need to be the ones pushing their children, boys and girls, outside of their comfort zones. If a child fails to launch, it is because the father did not pair him to launch by encouragement or calling them higher. It's as simple as that. Combine that with an overbearing mother, and you will have an entire generation of men believing the same horrible lie, that yesterday's average is good enough for today. This episode is dedicated to me stepping in and telling you what your parents never had the guts to tell you, that what they told you is a lie. It is not okay to be average anymore, especially as a man, because it's not okay to commit yourself to living in hell. It's not okay to be fat. It's not okay to be broke. It's not okay to be unable to defend yourself. It's not okay to not be able to talk to girls. It's not okay to succumb to unrepentant pornography consumption. It's not okay to be living under the tyranny of your parents' coddling. Andrew Tate about this issue is right. If you're average in today's society, you're a failure. You have failed as a man. Allow that to sink in. Really allow yourself to feel it. So that being said, if it's not okay to be average, what people must do today, particularly men, what can they do? That answer is equally simple, but far harder to execute. You must be excellent. You must be a ruthless, unforgiving savage about making yourself into a beast. You cannot afford to stoop to the level of men in our culture today. To do that is to die, and to die a horrifying and slow death. I don't want that for anyone, particularly for any man that is a part of my audience. What does this look like? How about, for starters, Having a gut that hangs over your waistline, you work out like an absolute savage every day until you see a six-pack come through. How about instead of curling in your bed like an impotent wimp watching porn all night, you develop a plan to ask out a woman by the end of the month and, actually do it? How about instead of complaining about capitalism or the economy or inflation, you man up, get coaching, acquire skills, and get a job or start a business? How about instead of pitying yourself, living in a state of bleak nihilism, you admit you're hopeless, like we all are, and submit to Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior? This is a good start, but it's not nearly enough. Being excellent is not optional. It is required to be a man who achieves anything in today's world. Even if you want a quote-unquote average life, like your dad and grandpa did, and as I do, by the way, you will have to fight tooth and nail to get it. Inflation isn't going anywhere. Sorry to burst your bubble. The job market will suck for a long time and will probably get worse. The rot of modern womanhood runs far deeper than it does for modern manhood. We're going to be stuck there for another 10 years, I predict. There is no one coming to save you, nor to solve any of your problems for you. Get over it. Suck it up. Be a man. If you don't, the world will continue to kick you in the teeth until you finally learn your lesson, if you learn it at all. This episode is dedicated to helping you learn it faster than most men do. In addition, I'm also here to deliver some good news. You can be excellent. In fact, it's never been easier to be excellent. The amount of knowledge and resources at your disposal today has never been easier to come by. The amount of mentorship that is taking place, most of which is free, by the way, is insane. If you look hard enough, most PDFs of books are on the internet. You can ask ChatGPT for anything. It's amazing. But excellence is not relegated to one piece of knowledge or one resource. Excellence, like everything else in life, is a choice. You can either choose to be excellent or choose to be a loser. The choice, as always, is yours. And it's okay if you aren't there yet, by the way, because I'm not in many ways. And most men who quote-unquote have it figured out aren't there either. The point is that you're on the path to getting there. But yet the same principle holds true in the inverse. If you're not a loser yet, and you're not doing what you can to become excellent, you're on your way to becoming a loser. You'll know it when you're there, because I've been there. Trust me. I would prefer that you've not ever been where I've been in that department. So if I can provide a recommendation, get excellent. Work really hard for a really long period of time. Cut all the toxic and negative people out of your life. Put down the pornography, the booze, and the weed. Stop eating like garbage and never stepping foot in the gym. Stop talking to women who don't respect you or themselves. Stop allowing your weak mind to prevent you from becoming a man. Stop pretending you're better than someone who believes in God, because you're not. Make these choices, and you'll end up making better ones because of them. And more importantly, you'll be on the path to excellence. Excellent, value-driven men are the key to cultural revival. If you're not one of those men, you are a part of the problem. There is no alternative to the excellence that men must strive for in today's world. To believe there is to stunt yourself from ever achieving anything. Become a savage. Do the work. Get your hands dirty. Get after it. It's the only way. It's only a matter of when you learn that it is the only way.